For those teachers out there, what are some stories about horrible parents you've had to deal with? A student of mine, first grade, came to school every day without a jacket, and when asked about it, he told me his jacket was too small and his family couldn't afford a bigger one. When winter came around, I raided the closet in the front office for a donated jacket for him. He lucked out, and there was a brand new jacket with matching hat and mittens in there, so I put them in a box I had laying around, and tucked them in his backpack. They were a little big, so I hoped he'd grow into them. I told him there was a present for him in his backpack but to wait until he got home to open it, as not to leave him vulnerable to questions and taunting from his classmates. The next day was warmer, so I wasn't shocked to see him without the coat. However, what was shocking was that his mother showed up at pickup in the family's SUV, wearing the jacket. I had to have a talk with the poor guy and arrange for a recess jacket for him that he left in his cubby so his mom wouldn't take another one. My mom is a kindergarten teacher, and she had this one terrible student who not only kicked her in the face while she was helping him with his work, but he actually stole her digital camera from her desk drawer. She keeps it at work to take pictures of kids' projects and events and stuff, to share with parents. His parents suggested that my mom shouldn't bend down to help students lest she be within kicking range, and to leave her valuables at home. WTF. Should have kicked the student. When they get all be all like tell him to get out of my kicking height. I don't think I have any worst stories. Mostly I notice a lot of trends. Parents are starting to tell teachers not to bother them with details about their child's education, i.e., little Johnny is failing. Why are you calling me about that? I also notice quite a number of parents who don't try to discipline their children at all. I had a student who was doing poorly and was always falling asleep in class. I called the father to notify him about the marks, and to suggest that maybe he needed more sleep. The father said, "What am I supposed to do about that? It's actually quite a common statement." The parents that bothered me the most were the parents of a boy with special needs. Every day they sent him the same lunch, macaroni with nothing on it. I asked them at the first conference why they did this and his mom said, "It's not like he'll notice." It was sad because he really did notice. When we had special lunch days he would get so excited about hot dogs or pizza. It's indicative of how they treated him overall. They didn't try to engage or stimulate him at all. The second part makes me sad. I was one of 4 teachers in a conference with Dee's mother and a school counselor. I was the last of the teachers to talk, but I said much the same as the other teachers. Dee skips class all the time, yells out constantly, never does his work, and regularly calls you over to ask questions before farting. Dee was awful. Who behaves like that in 10th grade? Anyway, after all 4 of the teachers said essentially the same thing, Dee's mom looked at the counselor and asked, "I don't understand why all these teachers lying on my son." Dee's older 2 brothers were in jail. I assume Dee followed in their footsteps. The fact that you are a teacher with that username made me smile. Not from a classroom. So far I have no nightmare parents I've had to directly deal with from teaching practicums. I had this one parent of a kid in my Girl Guide unit who was just awful. When we first met her kid, she would always ask questions about everything, didn't listen to instructions, and would then ask questions about everything she missed, and was generally clueless. Then we met her mother and it all made sense. The first time we met her she tried to sell us life insurance. That was her job, and in the first 5 minutes of talking to her she started about 4 topics yet never finished any of them. She drove around in an uninsured car, the irony, and would often offer to pick up drop off other people's kids as well. She was also always late for everything. Last to drop off, last to pick up. Here's where the story gets even worse. I guess she used to homeschool her kids. Scary to think about. In grade 1 she put her kid in public school. Every time she had a problem with the school her kid attended, she pulled her kid from the school and moved her to another school. It got to the point where the kid had gone to 4 different schools in less than a year. Her learning was severely behind, and it was hard to make and keep friends. I feel so sorry for whatever poor teachers had to deal with this mom. Was a humanities teacher briefly. Had a meeting with the mother of a boy due to his ongoing behavior problems in class. Bright kid, very creative, Just couldn't stop distracting some of his classmates. No biggie really. Mom brought our meeting to a premature end by announcing reading is for F and storming out of the room, yanking her kid along behind her. TLDR. Poor kid never had a chance. Sounds like she's the mother of half the children on Xbox Live. Not a teacher, I'm a juvenile counselor. But, on Monday I saw a kid who was brought in by her aunt and uncle. Dad was in jail. Mom was a junkie. I kept trying to help them come up with rewards for good behavior, that is. Trip to the zoo, family picnic, an hour of outside playtime kid, and they kept saying how no one likes her and how she hates everything. Worst was when I was asking the kid what happens when you steal. That was a crime. She said you get abandoned. My son has abandonment issues from years of abuse and his parents' bad divorce. This makes me so sad. I just want to cuddle her forever. My mom is a special ed teacher. She had a parent-teacher meeting with the parent of a severely disturbed young man with multiple problems. During the conference, the mother casually asked, "I'm not really sure, but do you think that maybe the reason my son has so many problems is because I smoked him every day while pregnant with him?" The whole room was in stunned silence for about 30 seconds before my mom piped up with yes. Holy crap. Some of these stories are just really sad. Most laughable experience I've had was with a plagiarism case. Kid had ripped his entire essay off the net. I'd googled a few sentences from his assignment and found the page he got the stuff from. Printed it out so the kid could see that the 2 copies were word for word. He vehemently denied it, so got his mum in for an interview. Showed her the submitted assignment and the web page printout, and her answer was that her dopey 15-year-old son had actually written the Wikipedia entry on the Treaty of Versailles, so it wasn't plagiarism at all. Nothing like supportive parents. My child would never kick a teacher. With all due respect, Mom, the bruise on my shin says otherwise. I once had a seriously unstable boy in my class. 1 minute, he would be perfectly pleasant and happy. The next, not so much. One day, we're playing Jeopardy to study for a test and the teacher gives candy to the winning group. The boy wasn't in a winning group, but wants some candy anyway. He goes up to the teacher and asks for some. She says no. He demands some. She still says no. This kid absolutely flips crap, grabs the nearest desk and throws it. My teachers yelling at us to get down, cover our heads. He's throwing everything he can reach and has just broken the window. Another teacher, male, hears the commotion and comes in to restrain the kid. He's taken down to the principal's office to meet his parents. We go back to class for 15 minutes when suddenly his dad bursts into the room. He starts screaming at my teacher, saying she upset him and he's going to get her fired. Then he runs out the room. We go back to class. I've had my fair share of parental horror stories, as it seems most of us teachers have had, but I think it's time for a pick-me-up. I teach digital arts and technology at an inner-city public high school in a gang-infested, poverty-ridden but culturally bright neighborhood. Last year, a student of mine, let's call him A, stole a MacBook laptop out of my classroom. After scouring video footage in detail, I identified the student who took it. The kid lied repeatedly to me about not taking it, and security couldn't find it on him or anywhere else at all. After escaping security, A picked up the laptop from another student, who he planted the laptop on earlier in the day, took it home, painstakingly cleaned the white keyboard and casing with a Q-tip, then promptly sold it to some dudes on the street for $500 cash. 2 days later, a random girl tells me about how A planted the laptop on the random kid. The accomplice admits. Security calls A back in and gets his father into school. Dad is furious with A. He takes A into their car and makes A drive through the streets of the hood to find the dudes he sold the laptop to. Dad forces A to buy the laptop back from the guys he sold it to for a markup price of $600, which A paid. Next morning, Dad makes A return the laptop back to my classroom in better condition than when he stole it. Not one missing file and sparkling MacBook white. There's hope for us yet. Love that, Dad. My stepfather was having parent-teacher conferences and he was talking to this kid's parents. The parents had a question about when my stepfather was going to go over the Civil War. My stepfather said it would happen in a week or so. The parents said, "Great, because we will pull our kid from the unit. We believe the Civil War never happened, and we are under the Confederate government. My stepfather was flabbergasted and didn't know how to respond. Then the parents got up and said to him, we will also pull our kid for the World War II unit, because the Holocaust was made up and never happened. I had a student that didn't show up to my class for 3/4 of the year. During parent-teacher night in spring, she came in. I tell her that her kid rarely comes to class and it may be beyond the point of being saved. The mother explains to me that her kid thinks it's too early and that I needed to give up my lunch later in the day to teach her kid so they didn't have to wake so early. I told her that I wouldn't be doing that and that I would buy her kid an alarm clock if it came down to that. She took offense and said that I was being a selfish butthole. Other than that, my students' parents are pretty awesome. No worst story, but after 25+ years in the classroom, I can tell you that awful kids generally have truly messed up parents. It's pretty shocking, really, frequently horrible. In fact, we have had teachers physically attacked during parent conferences in our nice little town in the heart of America, and the parents get a slap on the wrist. I like teaching and have had a rewarding career, but I would not do it again, and I do not want my kid to become a teacher, either. A story from my friend who's a high school teacher. A student turned in an exam with suspiciously similar solutions to a person near them. From past performance and the seating arrangement, it was clear which one of them was copying. My friend had some other teachers look through the exams to see if they would notice the same thing, which they all did. The student's mother came in and said that the teacher just didn't like her daughter and was just accusing her of cheating. For that reason, when the principal, or VP, said that several other teachers agreed with the assessment that her daughter had cheated, the mother said, well then, the teacher put her next to a good student to force her to cheat so she would get in trouble. TLDR. Mother said that the teacher forced her daughter to cheat because she didn't like her and wanted to get her in trouble. My mother is a teacher. This is only the worst one. There are more. She was teaching a class in elementary school that had a severely mentally handicapped girl in it. I'm talking constant drooling, unable to form words, just grunts and moans and yells. She clearly belonged in special ed, but her parents refused. They insisted she be put in a normal class because she does not need special ed. The classes were completely useless for her, and her noise and mess seriously disrupted the education of 30 other students. The school even had to pay an aide to be with her all day, because she could not take care of herself. When the school finally decided to go ahead and put her in special ed, the parents sued the freaking district, because their 12-year-old with the mentality of a 3-4-year-old did not belong in special ed in their minds. Teachers had to spend their days in court instead of their classes, and my mom had to deal with lawyers and parents telling her she had no idea what was best for their kid. TLDR. Parents of 12-year-old with 3-year-old brain insist she doesn't need special ed. Sue the school district for disagreeing. Reading these stories, I am reminded that bad teachers are less a problem than bad parents in America's education system. But because it's easier to blame teachers, it will never get fixed. We had an over-attentive and incredibly enthusiastic parent of a 4-year-old girl that suffered from shaken baby syndrome. The child was very emotionally stunted, couldn't walk and could barely speak. It was sad, and she wasn't making much progress. Whenever we would get time to talk to the mother about her daughter's care, she would immediately change the direction of the conversation to be about herself. There also were several stories floating around in regard to how her child got this way. Absolutely none of them made sense and were constantly changing. Without giving away a lot of personal information, over time it became pretty obvious that super special ed mom had some kind of Munchausen by proxy, but we had no proof and just had to watch the little girl for any other signs of abuse, incorrect medications, cuts, bruises, and reported to a nurse and guidance counselor that would alert CPS. I left about a few months after this drama. No word if anything ever came of it, and frick everything about this situation. My first and only year teaching 8th grade was a doozy. I was 21, and all my energy excitement about teaching was quickly zapped by parents dead set on proving me incapable of doing my job. I had parents send graded papers back to me with my comments corrected and challenged. One day, I was called into the headmaster's office to discuss my use of foul language in the classroom after a parent learned I had told a kid to stop dorking around. The worst, by far, was a mother who somehow got my cell number and just constantly harassed me at the end of the year because she wanted her child to get a wholly undeserved A. This mother had a reputation, but I was in no way prepared for her full-out abuse. When her daughter, whom I had repeatedly suggested receive some kind of outside academic assistance, ended up with a generous B in the class, she just lost it. I was visiting my sick grandmother when she started texting me, demanding to see the final exams. Being as they were final exams, I was not intending to return them to students. However, this woman had the headmaster so wrapped up in her crazy that he called and requested that I have my landlord open my house door so someone could grab the exams while I was out of town. This is on top of the mom's texting messages like, "You will never work again and those tests are mine. I paid for them. I want what I deserve." As a husband of a teacher, I cannot understand how this stuff is not harassment. I had a student who dressed in the goth fashion. Black pants and metal band t-shirt, long hair and polished nails. He was bullied relentlessly by boys, girls, even other teachers. Every day I'd try to fend off the verbal abuse knowing my classroom was the only 45 minutes reprieve he would get. Soon he joined science club just so he'd have a pass to eat in my room at lunch instead of the cafeteria. He was a really smart kid. He easily aced the tests and helped along the other students with labs. I saw him building friendships in class. Then he started skipping school. He started missing my class and falling behind. When he came back after close to 2 weeks he was even more withdrawn. He came to class and turned in all the work he'd missed. He checked my website, but skipped out on science club. After a few days of this pattern and him refusing to talk to me, I called home. My intent was to tell his parents how worried I was for him. My worry was suicide risk. I said, "Hello, I'm calling about your son, blank. I'm his biology teacher." Before I could go further, his mom says I don't need to hear it. "I'm pulling him out of school tomorrow. He's his own problem now." She hung up on me. I cried. I talked to my principal and school counselor and they promised to look into it, but he was withdrawn from school that week. He's still in my mind 5 years later. I'll always wonder what happened because I was a little goth kid once too. Should have dropped some math on that B. Let's say they were 10-year-old male. The average child's forearm is 5 centimeters across and 23 centimeters long. Well, at a hand of about 7 centimeters across and 15 centimeters long. Overestimate. Total surface area equals 0.022 m2. The average weight of the forearm and hand are about 2.7 kilograms. Force of gravity on the arm is 26.5 N. In order for the wind to begin to move his arm, it would require 1202.7 Pascal of pressure from the wind. That is a wind speed of 96.5 miles per hour, which is the bottom mark of a Category 2 hurricane. I feel sorry for you guys. Your life's dream was probably to help children learn, and you have to put up with this bulls. I'm sorry. Saw this on my Facebook wall today. This woman my mom works with teaching 2nd grade. Has a student who is threatening to punch her in the stomach since she's pregnant, and when she confronted the girl's father about it, he threatened to shoot her in the stomach. All because this woman felt the little girl ought to be held back. What the frick is wrong with people these days? You never threaten a pregnant woman. All of them. Because they all think their children are perfect snowflakes from Jesus. Thread, edit to add, I'm a pre-K teacher, so I get all of the crazy young parents who are anal about everything. My child came home with marker on his hands. Yeah, well, he's 4, and you're psychotic. My ex boyfriend was a high school orchestra teacher. For those who were never in band orchestra, let me assure you, it takes far more effort to fail one of those classes than it does to pass them. Showing up every day with your instrument and music is pretty much a guaranteed easy A. Well, one of the violin players was determined to fail X's class. She often skipped class, and when she did show up, she was missing her instrument, or her music. She often talked and disrupted class and was an all-around pain in the butt. On her first report card was a big, fat F. And that's when the phone calls started. I'm not sure who at the school gave this girl's mother my phone number. Phone was under my name, not my boyfriend's, and I purposefully had it unlisted and published. But I swore if I ever found out, there would be heck to pay. Because this mom called my house every night and screamed at my boyfriend, screamed at me, and screamed at my answering machine when I finally decided to stop answering the phone. She called administrators. She called the school board. If she called her local representative, I wouldn't be surprised. She was a loud, foul-mouthed bully who couldn't understand that her daughter had earned her bad grade. After a quarter of her phone calls, the administration finally caved and ordered my ex to raise her to her passing grade. He gave her a D. I think that if she called your phone number, which you stated was not under his name, then you could have reported her to the police for harassment. This happened last week. Kid comes to my classroom with picture money on a Monday that was due on the upcoming Friday. I tell him to put it in his book sack and bring it back on Friday since we were told not to collect it until then. He picks it up and tries to turn it in on Tuesday, this time trying to impress the people with the $15 you can clearly see when you hold it up to the light. I tell him to make sure that he puts it in his book sack so it does not get stolen and to make sure he does not turn it in until Friday. Wednesday rolls around, and you guessed it, the little genius takes it out again to turn it in, this time bragging that it contains $15 so the whole class can hear. I tell him to pick it up and hide it. Thursday morning I am pulled into the office by his irate mom asking why I let his money get stolen. I looked at my principal and told her my side of the story. She looked at the mom and told her there was nothing we could do. The mom left furious and I am sure she will try to take this to the central office. Nothing great, I know, but just a recent example of what we deal with on a weekly basis. In case you're wondering, this is a class of 3rd graders. He probs took it himself, then used this as an excuse that someone stole it. I coached baseball for 1 year of an age group of 11-12 year olds. The kids were so awesome, loved the sport, but the parents were terrible. There was police present at the playoffs and they also sold beer at the stadium. I no longer coach baseball. Where to start? I have one child in 3rd grade who gets school lunch, but is so picky, some days he won't eat anything. When informing the mom about it, she said yeah, I know he's so picky at home too. We suggested she start trying to introduce some new foods, veg mainly, at home. And she said she couldn't because she makes him his own special dinner of his favorite food separate from what the rest of the family eats every night. Also he eats cup noodle for breakfast every day. Met her dad one day in passing. Introduced myself as his child's homeroom teacher. Dad replied, "Oh, I'm sorry, my son is such a dumbass. He can't do anything, can he?" Son was in 1st grade, perhaps the worst, and authorities were called. One mother of 3 girls. Father passed away a few years ago. Family wrought with tragedy. Her daughter was in my 1st grade homeroom class. Daughter hadn't been doing her homework, so I asked her in private after class one day, "Why didn't you finish your homework last night? Did you forget?" To which she replied, "No, mommy was dancing so I couldn't do it." Confused, I asked her to elaborate. Turns out twice a week, the mom had been going to dance classes in the evening during which she would lock her 6, 4, and 3-year-old daughters in the car wearing diapers. Needless to say, we contacted the mom and the proper authorities to help the family. I wish I could say she has improved, but I know at least the kids aren't being locked in a car anymore. I'm not a teacher, but my wife is. Her 1st year teaching, she had a parent-teacher conference about one of her students that was failing algebra. The kid's mom claimed that the only reason her son was failing was because my wife didn't announce tests ahead of time and this he couldn't prepare properly. My wife explained that she writes test dates on her board at least a week ahead of time and also posts the dates on her website, and even showed her where on the website the test dates were posted. Instead of recanting her story in the face of overwhelming evidence, she goes ballistic and yells at my wife that she's a liar and other awful things. This was my wife's 3rd parent-teacher conference ever, and so had no idea how to handle this situation and ended up crying her eyes out in front of the parent. If I ever meet this woman, I will destroy her. As another husband of a teacher, I can say that one of the reasons I never went to her previous school was because of my fear of what I would say if I ran into some of the parents of her kids. Not a teacher, but I know a family friend who attacked a teacher at an elementary school. Apparently the family friend's son had attacked a fellow student and the family friend refused to believe her precious boy could do such a thing. So the family friend grabbed the teacher by the hair and beat the crap out of her. The family friend moved to a new city not too far away shortly after. The boy continued to have temper issues and would wail on kids, but the mother always excused his behavior, and her other child was severely depressed but her mother wouldn't acknowledge it, so just kept her home and she would miss a ton of school. She eventually pulled the kids out of high school after having had transferred them from every high school in the city, and none of the schools were adequate for her precious. The boy, now 18, plays WoW all day and the girl, 21, hibernates in her room just sleeping. I'm sad. My mother was a school psychologist in a town made of up mainly trailer parks and an outlet mall. During a parent-teacher meeting about a child's behavior, the stepmother proclaimed, "Well, she didn't come out of my hole." Whoa, classy. I taught in the Mos Eisley of Saudi Arabia. It was close to Yemen and had a smuggling port. The town has a H problem, along with hash and cat. There was an Indian teaching at the other university in town. 90% of Saudis don't learn and they're paid to go to college. They hate doing homework and everything you tell them is answered with, "I know teacher, I know," even when they don't. So this student disputes his grade. The teacher won't change it for him. The student went to the police and said the teacher was demanding bribes for a better grade. In Saudi, it's Saudis first, then Westerners, and down at the bottom is Indians. The very bottom is Nepalese. The cops pick up the teacher and torture him for a confession. They electrocute his balls and pull out his fingernails. This goes on for a month. The teacher still says he's innocent. The cops believe him, and they let him out. In Saudi, you can't leave without an exit visa, and he can't get an exit visa until this goes through the court system. He's very lucky the school rehired him, but he's trapped there for another 3 years or so. At the same school, another student took a shot at a teacher, but escaped to Yemen. The best at my school was a student trying to attack a teacher who asked him for his homework. Other students held him back. Our school, being buttholes, just moved the kid to another class without telling the other teacher why he was moved. Yet another good reason to never, ever travel to Saudi Arabia for any reason whatsoever. They take racism to all new levels. This was the beginning of the end for me as a teacher. While teaching a pre-K class, a rather large woman, I'm 5 feet tall, was standing over me, pointing in my face and yelling at me, asking, "Why in the world would you tell my daughter she is not a real princess? She is a real princess. Why would you say that? What gives you the right to tell her she is not a real princess?" This was in front of the kids and other parents at drop-off time. After I got her into the hallway, I tried to explain, 1, she isn't in fact a real princess, 2, I told her she could pretend to be anything she wanted, and 3, she was upsetting the other girls who also wanted to be princesses, and she told them they couldn't because she was the real princess. When the school director asked me to appease this woman by apologizing, which I refused to do, I decided I was done with teaching after 14 years of teaching kindergarten and pre-K. Just think, it wasn't a straw that broke the camel's back, it was a princess. Just think, it wasn't a straw that broke the camel's back, it was a princess. Brilliant. I was a teacher assistant, not anymore, at an elementary school. This girl, Sadie, had a reputation that preceded her. At the beginning of the year, I had already heard horror stories about both her and her parents and thought I had prepared myself for the year with her. The teacher I was working with, 3rd grade class at the time, was crazy, just dumb. She was awful at promising or threatening the kids and not keeping her end of the deal, so the kids quickly learned that threats of punishments would never actually happen. Well, Sadie was awful in class, a bully to everyone including adults. The teacher I was with would always threaten Sadie with, "Miss Prudy B is going to call your parents. She's going to call your mom." So Sadie would apparently get picked up by her mom and ask her, "Did Miss Prudy B call you today?" to find out if she was in trouble. I never called the mom. I would ask the teacher if she wanted me to, and the teacher would say, "Never mind. Don't worry about it," or "Sadie's behaving now, so don't worry." Well, Fast forward a few months and this has been happening almost every day. I didn't have the authority to call the mom without the teacher telling me to, and the teacher never ever sent a kid to the office because she could handle it. I'm working in carpool one afternoon when Sadie's mom pulls up. I say hi to her and mention something about Sadie. The mom went off on me, screaming at me in the carpool line, in front of my coworkers and all the other carpool moms, cussing at me and berating me. How dare you threaten my child? She comes home every day afraid you're going to punish her. You effing B. How dare you, yada, yada, yada. Oh, and the best part is she also yelled at me for being unprofessional by talking about her daughter when other people were present. She was referring to the infant she had strapped in the backseat of the car. When I was able to lift my jaw off the ground, I said thank you. If you would like to schedule a conference, I would be happy to do that. I then proceeded to spend the rest of the afternoon bawling my eyes out. I was mortified in front of everyone at the school. It sucked. In the end, the teacher did have a conference with Sadie's parents and owned up the fact that she was the one threatening Sadie with the phone calls, not me. Fortunately, I didn't have to be present at the conference. I don't know that I would have been able to keep my mouth shut. The mom never made eye contact with me in carpool again. This is one about a mom you'd think was horrible. She was a crack-addicted prostitute, but she really loved and cared for her kids as best she could. I'd see her in the mornings on my way to school on her corner and she'd smile and wave to me. No shame in her game. Till crack W make better parents than a lot of people. One of the guys in my year wanted to go on a trip which had places given out on a first come first serve basis. He didn't bring in his reply slip and therefore didn't get a place, so his parents brought in 2 lawyers to complain so that he could go. Reminds me of a principal I had whose response to stuff like that was, I am a lawyer. I can delay this so long it will be meaningless by the time it's over. Wife and I used to run a children's play place business. One time we made the mistake of running a Groupon special. We had to deal with so many irate parents who were furious that they missed the deal that it became, by far, one of the worst mistakes we made. Frick Groupon and all of their users. Not me, but my mom. My mom has been teaching for dang near 30 years. Right now she's supervising a school-funded daycare at one of the high schools in my county so girls can go to school and get their diploma without having to worry about paying for daycare. My mother told one of the girls to be careful about letting everyone hold her newborn for obvious reasons. Girl flips out on my mom and my mom has to do a parent-teacher conference with the girl and her mother. The girl's mother proceeds to go off on my mom and tells my mom not to tell her daughter how to raise the granddaughter and about how my mom doesn't know crap about raising kids. My mom is a single mother and has one kid getting an AA in a few days and another graduating from high school in a few months. Meanwhile, this poor excuse of a parent is defending her daughter who has a 1.6 grams PR and a baby at 16. We had a parent who invited all the boys in the entire 3rd grade class, except for one, to a professional baseball game backstage tour of the stadium for their son's B-day. To top it off, it was a school day, so the one boy who wasn't invited had to go to school and be the only boy in the class. No scarring there at all. Horrible parents. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.